Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to start now. So, welcome everyone. We're going to go through in this session a little bit about Adarma and our managed service, and we're going to talk through some of the things we've seen during the lockdown period, and talk around some of the threats, and then have a look at a bit on the Adarma roadmap. What you see on a picture here, this is apt. This is a picture of an empty SOC just after it was built, actually. And today that's the case because all staff are working remotely. Initially, we split staff between the primary and secondary SOC. And then as lockdown started, remote working was always a kind of a DR option for us and had been tested. So now today, all our analysts and SOC engineering staff are working successfully from home, and happy to say that, through lockdown, we've continued to meet our SLAs. So we don't always have a chance to get an insight into the Adarma SOC because it's a physically isolated environment within Adarma. So it's a pleasure to be able to have Mike and Mark here, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute to talk about their insights as to what's been happening in the SOC. I'll just put into the chat window if you wouldn't mind to keep muted. We'll have some time at the end to go through any questions. And if you want to pose a question in the chat window, then I'll be happy to come back to them at the end. So I'm Stuart Brown. I am a lead sales engineer here at Adarma. I've been at the company 3 years next month, actually. And I help our customers articulate kind of the benefits of our solutions portfolio, and in particular, I'm a Splunk security matter expert. So over to you, Mike. First of all, welcome.
Thank you, Stuart. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Varley. I've been with Adarma for it'll be 6 years coming up next week, actually. First off, I kind of started my career with Adarma on site in a cybersecurity operations centre on premise for one of our customers. I was there for around about 3 years, started off as a tier 1 technical resource and left as a tier 3 technical resource. From there, I was part of the initial team that helped to build the Adarma managed SOC. And for about 2 years or so, I led my own team of 24/7 analysts. And currently, I specialise in bringing new customers into our managed service. Over to you, Mark.
Cheers, Mike. I'm Mark Williams. I'm the SOC manager. I'm responsible for delivering the service to many of our Adarma clients. I myself have worked in IT since 1998. 15 of these years have been in IT security, with the last 5 being in Adarma, and I've assumed the role of SOC manager for the past 2 years.
Excellent, thank you, guys. Right, let's get stuck into it. I should say that we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. I do have a few slides to start with, but don't worry, it's certainly not death by PowerPoint. We'll get more interactive as we kind of we go through the slides to the end. Adarma is a company that really was formed out of the frustrations that our 2 founders, David Calder, our managing director, and Nathan Dornbrook, the frustrations around particularly consuming managed services. And we've grown from 6 people to 270 plus today. In fact, we're the UK's largest now independent security company. FTSE 350 companies are who we serve in the financial industry, retail, and increasingly cloud customers or cloud first customers. And we were Splunk Partner of the Year in 2019. Just to give you a feel for what we do, If someone could go on mute, that would be great. I'm getting a little bit of feedback there. I guess if you look at the top left-hand side, you know, where there's some customers where we kind of have a full outsource, we've designed and built their SOC, and we provide all the people, and in this case, even look after the physical security. And at the other end, we have a customer such as the asset management firm here in the bottom, one of the bottom windows, where we've helped them build their processes and implement their ServiceNow technology for security operations. And we have a number of clients who take our multi-tenant SOC managed service. And many of our customers, as I said, have a cloud-first strategy. So cloud security logs are critical. And now we've got lots of experience with them. In fact, we've developed over 70 AWS specific use cases. So really, we've got everything in between, you know, dedicated managed service to hybrid till some of the largest kind of SOCs in the country. And we're going to touch on a lot of these services today, especially the Security Operations Center, including the monitoring analytics side. I'm going to touch on workflow and automation, and particularly around some things around the endpoint and enhanced protection and threat management. But we offer consultancy managed services and the technology associated with them. And our partners are really, I mean, Splunk is our longest and deepest relationship. To give you an idea, of the 270 staff at Adarma, 170 of us have Splunk accreditations, and between us we have over, if you could go on mute, that would be great, whoever just joined. Thank you. Over 700 accreditations. I mentioned ServiceNow and their SecOps, and then working around the loop, we've got Symantec, DLP, 3 vendors around focused around the endpoint, so Tachyon, CrowdStrike, and Illumio, and Tenable for the vulnerability management. And really, in terms of the managed service, which I'm just going to move on to now, you know, as I said, this is born out of the frustration of traditional MSP models that use kind of out-of-the-box architecture, predefined use cases, sometimes constraints on the type of data that that can be ingested, and, you know, kind of black box. You know, you're kind of tied in to a lot of service providers because the logic and the IP and the rules that are created stay with that managed service provider. Sometimes you don't even see the rules which are protecting you, or all you really see is the outcome in terms of you know, reports and incident escalations, and very much impersonal. We don't believe an impersonal approach works at all. We believe you have to have intimate knowledge of each customer and contextual information about their environment for security to be effective. And we don't believe in charging for additional features, and we'll talk through this in a little while about how we achieve that. So moving on to the managed service itself. So in this graphic, you really see the operations center, and we use Jira for ticketing and workflow, and that is integrated. Each of our customer has Splunk. Why Splunk is because we still think it's the best data analytics platform and SIEM on the market. We believe that there is an absolute positive TCO against the Splunk on-premise deployment, and a lot of our customers now are considering building Splunk in their own cloud environments, either in AWS or another. We've been doing a lot of work recently, and we think the cost of ownership of Splunk Cloud is very much on a par with trying to kind of do it yourself. When you look at what you would have to build in to have the same kind of level of resilience. For instance, having to build out your infrastructure in 3 separate AWS data centers, the automation you need for provisioning and self-healing, the backups, the security. We think when you factor all those in, that Spartan Cloud becomes compelling. And then we'll touch on the CrowdStrike and Tenable that we can integrate. In terms of what's on your site, on premise for a customer, well, obviously there'd be some agents for scanning for Tenable, and agents running for CrowdStrike. And in terms of Splunk, we would run the agent software on the servers from which you want to collect information, and then kind of intermediate forwarders where we'd collect things like syslog. And then we would, they'd be collected and indexed in Splunk Cloud, and then tickets can be raised into our Jira platform. So that's essentially what our managed service looks like. And, you know, I'll turn to you in a sec, Mark. We talk a lot about transparency, but maybe you could talk us around that. Are we really totally transparent, Mark?
Sure, thanks. Yes, yeah, we are totally transparent to the client. We use Jira as our ticketing system and our development system, and the client has complete access to this system. So if you're familiar with maybe your IT help desk or service desk at your own organization, you'll log a call, it'll go to the service desk, you'll be able to see the information regarding what you've done, but you won't see all the stuff that goes on in the background and what the guys are doing to fix things, and you certainly won't see other people's tickets. That's not the case in the SOC. In the SOC, you can look at, in Jira, should I say, in Jira, you could look at any investigation that the guys have raised for our client. You could also look at the development work that goes on in the background, the development of new rules, the threat hunts that are carried out, the data onboarding, and that's all recorded in the tickets in Jira. We genuinely encourage, or regularly should I say, encourage clients to get involved in that development work, and we frequently tag them, and they tag us to say what their opinion is on how the development work is going, or if they've got anything they want to add to the tuning or the monitoring that we've been doing. So yeah, there is complete transparency with regards to what's going on in the background. We've also got a bunch of dashboards that gives us or gives the client a sort of measure of how well things are doing, and the ability to create new dashboards for the client if the ones that they've got aren't sufficient.
Right. So are we saying then that, you know, a client would have exactly the same view as an analyst would?
Yes, basically you've got exactly the same view as what an analyst would. Everything an analyst could see, you can see, or the client can see. Obviously, you can't see other clients' tickets. That would be wrong. We isolate those away, but you can see everything that has been worked on for your company. Right.
And how long is that information kept for? Is it like a week or a month or something?
So we keep that information indefinitely unless instructed by the client not to, for policy or regulatory reasons, but generally it's kept indefinitely unless asked not to. So you could look back on an investigation that was carried out years ago or weeks ago.
Right. And something else that I know is that, you know, we have an instance of Splunk Cloud for every single customer. We don't share the Splunk instance. Each customer has their own instance. And so that means, you know, it's kind of, it sounds odd, but, and we often say this, we're the easiest managed service provider to get rid of. Because, you know, the intellectual property and the rules that we create are in your instance of Splunk. And if you ever decided do you want it to change managed service provider, you know, that intellectual property is yours. And you would just remove access for the Adarma SOC.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's another example of the transparency here. The actual work that's carried out, the rules that are doing the detection, the way that they're alerted, that's all visible to the client because they own the contract with Splunk and the search heads themselves, not us. So with other companies, it may be a bit of a black box. They'll have an alert. You won't know what it looks like, but you'll see the results of it generated and given to you in a ticket, but you will have no insight as to how it was developed or say into how it was developed, and you certainly wouldn't be able to view it or copy it.
Yeah, great, Mark, thanks. So let's turn to what happens when we kind of bring on a new customer. So we start with something that we call a data source assessment, and that is a discussion and an exercise that I normally do initially with a customer, and we'll look at the data sources, the data types that you want to bring into scope to ingest into the scene, and that will give us a couple of things really. It will give us number one, the estimated license size that we want for Splunk, and also then we can map these data sources and map them against use cases, and the use case framework aligned to MITRE ATT&CK, so that we can show you with the data that you're intending to ingest into Splunk what kind of coverage you would get across different techniques and procedures. Tactics and techniques, I meant to say, sorry. So a little bit more on that. So yeah, the way that we align to the, and I'm aware that you won't be able to see this. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this is the mapping into the MITRE framework. Where it's green on the picture is where we have data to support that that particular technique, and where it's red and the various colors here, this is actually the techniques leveraged by APTs that are targeting the financial industry. And so the darkest shades here indicate the frequency. So you see here, like file deletion here is something that's really commonly used for targeting financial services organizations, and yet we don't have data. So it's a really good way of covering, showing where the gaps are in the coverage with the data that you're proposing. I'm going to move on to now the commercial model and how we use this information. So we've just talked about data source assessment, and we use this to create the managed service sizing itself, a capacity model. So there is a sort of there is a correlation between, once we understand what data you have, we understand a lot of these data source types. We've ingested them sort of hundreds of times before, and there's a correlation between the data that you have and the Splunk license size that will eventually mean or generate. And we can use that to estimate how many events this sort of data normally, if you don't have a SOC or SIEM already, for instance, you won't have any data about your expected number of events and incidents. But there's a pretty strong correlation, and our experience tells us that we can use the data source assessment. We can look at your architecture and where your data centers are and where you want to collect data from. And then we can talk about the risks and estimate the actual incidents. And we put all this into a capacity model. And why that's important? Well, you see here roughly half the time here, the red pie here is monitoring, triage, and investigation. So roughly half the time, and this is kind of reactive work. But we also, in the blue pie, we need to keep the lights going. We need to keep the tools optimized and doing their job. And there's also ad hoc support for our managed service customers and obviously service reporting. But then the use case development and data onboarding. We can't have a service where we just give you a set of rules and they stand still for 6 months and we say, well, you're going to get another release in 3 or 6 months' time. It just doesn't work. They have to constantly evolve. Threats constantly evolve, and use cases have to evolve. So having use case development and being able to onboard new data within the structure of the managed service contract without having to charge you extra is something that's key to us. And threat hunting we'll talk about in the next slide a little bit more, but being able to proactively go out and look for things that we haven't actually built rules for. Mark and Mike, is there anything? I guess one thing that kind of for you, Mark, what would happen if we exceed or burst in any of these kind of areas?
Well, if you exceed or burst in any of these kind of areas, we don't charge the client for that. What we do is we'll look to see what's caused that the burst in traffic or the over allocation of alerts. So what we probably do is do the tuning first of any rules that are firing too many false positives. If that's not the case, if it's a case that there's just too many rules firing true positives, then we'd either look at swapping out some of the less required rules or the lower risk rules as something that's more higher risk if you wanted to add extra rules. And if you're going over your allocation, we could look at raising that allocation for you. But 9 times out of 10, it's down to the tuning, and it drives a lot of the processes in our SOC to make sure that the rules don't fire too many false positives.
Yeah. And Mike, maybe I could ask you, what happens if, we talk a lot about reducing false positives, and you see this red pie, or the red pie in this graph here. It is roughly half of the kind of the time. What happens if we're really good at false positive reduction? Do we just kind of sit on our laurels then and say, aren't we doing a fantastic job? What does it mean to the customer?
No, I think that's a fantastic question. As Mark kind of just alluded to a moment ago, is if we do experience like a burst in capacities, we will do some tuning to try and those volumes down. But that's not the only time that we do tuning. Is in the SOC, it's almost like a continuous cycle of self-improvement. We don't want to, or the SOC analysts don't want to be dealing with noise and false positives and things that don't bring any value, because it kind of wastes their time and it wastes the time of our customers, to be perfectly honest. And what we find is as we kind of progress with our customers and we get better understanding of who they are and the intricacies of their environment, is we can get a better idea of what's going on. We can do our tuning and reduce volumes. That then frees up capacity for more use cases. Ultimately, one of the biggest considerations we make when we're developing new use cases for deployment to our customers is whether or not they have sufficient capacity and whether or not we're going to be pushing them over that allowance. So as we kind of reduce the false positives and the noise through our self-improvement cycle, is we free up that capacity and we can bring in new use cases for our customers.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mike. So hopefully just to cement this point and to put it into context, why we think this capacity model is so important. So the goal of any SOC, right, is to produce, to be able to detect attacks, okay, so true positives. And so we do that by choosing the right use cases, going back to the slide a few earlier, where we map it against the MITRE and we map it against the risks that you face. So getting the right customized use cases in the first place is so important. But then we've got within the contract, within the managed service contract, the ability for built-in use case development. So we can always be improving our detection capability. And we have the Splunk use case library to draw on if we need it. And also our own use case library of over 200 rules now, specifically developed for Splunk. And then really to moving to the right on true negatives, have an increasing confidence that if something is rated as benign, that it is benign. So that starts with some baselining. But as we start tuning out false positives and we adding in our detection capability on the true positive side, then we can get more and more confidence that if something is rated as benign, then it really is benign. False positives is a fact of life for every SOC. And we do our best. Mike very eloquently described the fact that it's in the best interests of us and our customers to work together to reduce false positives, because that unlocks extra capacity that we can be doing proactive work like threat hunting and bringing on new use cases. But we'll be tuning based on event volume. That'll be picked up in the service review. It also just sort of picked up naturally by, we see the same ticket firing or the same rule firing day after day after day. It just sticks out like a sore thumb, and we'll be looking at that for tuning. Or tuning, and we really encourage our customers to do this, tuning based on a ticket closure code. And this could be an analyst, or it could be a customer to say, right, this is a false positive, but if you do X, Y, and Z, or whitelist an IP address, it would improve the sort of efficacy of this rule. And then the last one, the worst case scenario for any SOC, not being able to detect an attack. And unfortunately, threats evolve all the time, and it does happen. So first of all, our goal is to obviously reduce those. And we'll learn lessons from security incidents reviews, and from that new use cases will be developed. And of course, Splunk is a powerful data analytics platform, right? And the statistical, time series, and pattern anomaly detection, really powerful tools. So to give you an idea, some of the statistical tools, a lot of a rare occurrence of a particular sequence is important, and like the first time an external IP address has tried to access a website, the first time a new IP address has tried to access a critical asset, or the first time a new protocol was used against a critical asset. And the time series, one of the most powerful things in Splunk is being able to look at a time horizon and do a correlation search against everything that was happening from multiple different data sources and see what was happening in a certain time horizon. And again, pattern anomaly detection. So looking at more complex queries and sequences of events that would indicate an anomaly. And then finally, we could have threat modeling or threat intelligence from you, the customer, from our own intelligence that we get, or just something that you as a customer are worried about. And then we will create a hypothesis for this and then start a threat hunt and either prove or disprove that hypothesis. So I'm going to move swiftly on into the roadmap, and I've chosen to speak here about things that have actually been built. So this all exists, and this is all going through early adopter trials with some of our customers. So, ringing the bell, well, hey, automation's here. This is we're the first Splunk-based managed service with automation in the UK. And if you look at this graphic, you'll see here that, within the operations center, we now have our automation platform, Splunk Phantom, and that is integrated with our ticketing and workflow. And so now we can, we have the 200 or so kind of manual playbooks and use cases that we've always had, and now we have automated use cases as well. So we can take events from a customer Splunk environment and automatically create tickets. And we're going to focus initially on triage. And this is really a game changer, because we estimate that we will see a 30 to 50% improvement with automated incident triage, and therefore faster mean time to remediation. We avoid the analyst fatigue of these fairly time-consuming, repetitive, and very boring investigations that allows our analysts to focus on higher value security tasks for our customers. And most importantly, this will enable our managed service customers to take advantage of automation, but crucially, without the large investment it requires. And moving on, using this automation to develop further. Again, with our early adopter clients, we have this all built and running already. So being able to integrate the automation platform with, in this instance, an EDR solution, CrowdStrike, so we can provide customers with a true managed response capability. So this would, so we can take agreed remediation actions within your CrowdStrike assets for things like quarantining a device. And then we're going to extend that to what we're calling the Managed Extender Detection and Response Service. So the XDR service will extend this capability beyond CrowdStrike to other technologies like firewalls, proxy servers, email systems, a vulnerability management system, so that we can do things like block IP addresses. And then finally, again, in early adopter trials at the moment, so all fully built and operational, is our managed vulnerability service based on Tenable IO. And it really allows the SOC to manage the life cycle, or monitor the life cycle of vulnerabilities better. So we'll be able to prioritize a lot better the vulnerabilities. So using Tenable's vulnerability priority rating, which is an indication of an indication that a vulnerability is likely to be imminently exploited. And when I say imminently, this is done on a daily basis on a rolling 28-day, looking 28 days out. So that adds valuable context to security investigations. So I want to move on then to the final part of this now, and want to talk about what's been happening during lockdown. I'm going to come to you, Mike, first. I've read a lot about COVID-specific threats, Mike. Phishing, malware, even fake VPN installer sites. Can you maybe just talk us through what we've seen in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're currently living in some very interesting times at the moment. At least for myself, COVID is probably the first worldwide event or global event that has impacted everybody. Whether you're an enterprise organization, whether you're small home or office, or you're just an end user in your house, it has affected everybody. And threat actors are absolutely capitalizing on this. I think one of the interesting things that we've seen from COVID is actually from threat intelligence platforms. So when we first had reports via the news that there was an outbreak in Wuhan in China, we were seeing these threat intelligence platforms being inundated with indicators of compromise for threat actors tackling and targeting that specific region. And I think what was interesting about that is that if you weren't keeping up with the spread of the virus via like mainstream news outlets, you absolutely could on threat intelligence platform. You can watch it just roll across from China, roll across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and now into the Americas. And I think the current political situation in the UK is having a big impact in the sense that regional governments are issuing their own specific guidance. And so a lot of people are feeling a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. They want to make sure that they are following the right guidance, that they themselves are safe, that their loved ones are safe. And threat actors are absolutely capitalizing on that fear. And what we've been seeing recently is the number of our customer organizations are having significantly higher click-throughs for phishing emails. A lot more are opening malicious attachments. And yes, as we'll actually go on to cover in a moment, we've been seeing people attempting to download fake versions of official VPNs so they can work remotely.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. And Mark, if I could turn to you about remote working. So, we've read that Microsoft Teams has seen, for instance, a 37% increase in traffic in the UK. So collaboration tools and VPNs must be close to overload, I guess, for a lot of our customers. And I've heard the SOC are doing some more, I guess, kind of more monitoring rules rather than, our traditional pure detective ones. So I guess in effect looking at, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Maybe you could just talk around that for us.
So remote access technologies are, if they weren't business critical before, they almost certainly are now. So what we're offering to a lot of our clients is performance dashboards that could keep an eye on the volumes of traffic, as well as look for malicious activity in that traffic, which isn't as easy to do as it sounds because of the volumes of traffic. It's difficult to detect what is unusual, unauthorized or failed password attempts against just normal users typing in the wrong password. So we're really bolstering those sort of rules, especially for clients who don't have 2FA on their VPNs. We've also got other rules that look at other indicators of compromise for these remote access technologies, such as improbable distance covered, where basically it looks at two geolocations
that's the Superman use case, right?
Yeah, that's the Superman use case. So the scenario would be we see a login from, say, Paris, and then 2 minutes later a login from New York. So yeah, you'd have to be Superman in order to cover that distance in time and log in both areas. We do see some false positives of that with the use of VPNs, people connecting to VPNs from other countries and then dropping off and looking like they're back in a different country altogether. And that's what we work on to tune those out and whitelist those out with the customer. There's other things as well, such as multiple logins from an IP for an individual user, not necessarily improbable distance covered. It just looks very unusual, maybe some sort of botnet activity trying to attack accounts. The usual password spraying. We've got some quite good rules with our experience with credential stuffing about separating the wheat from the chaff with regards to anomalous behavior in light of massive traffic spikes and people using the VPN and picking out what is actually malicious.
Right. So a couple of things on that. I think on a slide, and I think our attendees probably can't really see this, to be fair, but in the graphic on the screen in the bottom left-hand corner, this is leveraging something called the predict command in Splunk. So we have a baseline here. We're looking at VPN usage here, and based on historical analysis, you can see the kind of the upper and the lower mark around the kind of the central line here. So this is actually Splunk's predicted high, if you like, a high watermark and a low watermark. So these kind of dashboards, and these are real dashboards, right? You can see here WFH, so working from home dashboards that we've actually created for some of the clients. And Mike, as we were talking there, I think, for you, I guess one of the things that I guess is going to be happening in kind of home networks is, if you're getting lots of VPN timeouts, if your VPNs are getting so overloaded that they're causing instability, that's going to cause problems, right? And do you think that, this, you would see that, Mike, as maybe some kind of early warning indicator? Oh, and what might you do kind of after that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. We've actually seen it with a couple of our customers in the past couple of months, where their existing VPN infrastructure was perfectly fine for business as usual operations, and when 90% of the workforce suddenly switched to remote working, they actually had to buy additional appliances just to make sure that they could cope with the load. And as we're mentioning, is potentially anomalous activity. Users that are failing to connect to the VPN, we're getting a lot of dropped sessions, could indicate that there is actually a problem with the VPN infrastructure. And I know that, we're all working from home at the moment, and so if the corporate VPN goes down, I know that, personally, I don't want to stop working if I don't have to, and there'll be a lot of users that are in that kind of position as well. And so they might try and find additional ways, or ways to resume that kind of working from home and the collaboration between their colleagues through unapproved third-party services. For example, if the corporate VPN goes down and they're no longer to access their OneDrive, they might choose to try and access something like Dropbox or Google Drive, so that they can continue, they can facilitate that collaboration with their co-workers. And they're not always savvy to the security implications of that. Obviously, storing something with a third party is, we don't have oversight of their internal procedures. They say it's secure, but we don't know for sure. We don't know if the data has been intercepted when it's been transmitted. There's all sorts of considerations there. And thankfully, we have use cases that can help us detect this kind of activity. Looking at the things like OneDrive, if you're a user of Office 365, is we have use cases that can detect users that are sharing objects with external parties. We have the ability to look and check to see if users are setting up things like mailbox auto forwarding rules to automatically send emails outside of the business. Alternatively, is we have the ability to look at web proxy traffic to see, are users attempting, if the VPN's dropped, are users attempting to access sites such as Dropbox, Google Drive, and third-party storage sites. And in the event that the corporate policy blocks the access to these sites by default, are they then trying to look at anonymizers and web proxies to bypass these corporate controls?
Excellent, thank you. Well, that leads me nicely into kind of the last point, and I think cyber hygiene is not really something our clients would normally prioritize for the SOC. In fact, almost always it's normally left to internal client infrastructure teams. But during lockdown, it probably should be, and even Nathan, our CTO, has talked about this subject extensively recently. So I'm just going to and I'll ask for comments from you both in a minute, but I think if we consider what either we are doing or what we could do. And obviously for us, we have to have the data in Splunk. But I mean, one of the obvious ones is the number of devices within the estate which are checking in for regular updates. It now is kind of 12 or 14 weeks or whatever it is since most of us were in the corporate office. Is everything getting their antivirus updates, updates, and up-to-date EDR policies? Looking at the effectiveness of the patching process. I mentioned Tenable. If there's a vulnerability with a high CVSS score and a high what's called a VPR rating, meaning it's likely to be exploited imminently. Well, this is something that would add valuable context into the SOC. And on the screen here, we have, if you have Office 365, there's a lot of really good security dashboards. And, so one of them might be, one of our use cases might be looking for the use of shadow IT. So if we allow OneDrive as a company, I'll be looking for any use of unauthorized software like Dropbox. And here we can look at the Office 365 logs, and I can see where information is being stored and see it on a map geographically, where information is being shared externally. and I can see even like file names of user of information actually shared externally. So I don't know if there's I think there's probably other examples, Mike and Mark. One of them which springs to mind would be excessive web download, which I believe is a use case that all of our customers would use. Is that correct? Oh, you're both on mute. You thought I'd stopped asking questions.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a multitude of ways that we could look for that sort of shadow IT activity via proxy logs, connections out to social media sites or any sort of site that will give you the ability to download or upload information or data, should I say. There's also stuff we could do around Office 365 with sending emails out to unrecognised or personal accounts if we've got the data in there, personal email accounts I mean by that. We've got the ability to identify who you've shared files and folders with if they're external to the company, for if you've got tools such as Box or these sort of collaborative tools as well. Again, it's down to if we get the logs, because we do that sort of bespoke service where we learn the technology, understand how it works, and then look for evidence of malicious or anomalous activity within the logs.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Well, that's the content actually that we were gonna. We're just on what 45 minutes, so I am going to invite anyone to ask any questions. We have 10 minutes or so left, so we can take a couple of questions if that's appropriate. So I have one here, and I'll have a go at answering this, and maybe Mark or Mike, you can help out with anything that I'm missing. So the question is, let me get this right. How long does it take to develop a use case? Well, if I sort of summarize kind of the approach, is we need a driver for a use case. Either that's a particular risk that you're facing, it might be a gap in the MITRE framework that you're trying to plug, it could be a result of threat intelligence. But we need that driver and then document that. It will then be added into to a backlog. So we do use case development basically in sprint tasks for a customer, and they're running concurrently for most customers. So it'll be added to a backlog. We develop a use case, test it, and tune it, and then release it. And by the way, also in the roadmap, we're improving the way that we design and publish use cases to our managed service customers using Socket. But I guess, Mark, how long does it take?
Yeah, so to develop a use case can take quite a bit of time. Going back to what we already mentioned about making sure there's not too many false positives, we generally ensure that every rule goes through a 2 weeks warranty or 2 weeks monitoring mode, which basically means we run the rule for 2 weeks over production data to see if it alerts, and as it almost always does, it will fire a number of false positives. So we spend that 2 weeks consulting with the client and tuning that down. There's obviously the development side of it as well, and for the more tricky rules, if we've not already got the log source, we need to onboard that log source and ingest and extract the relevant information from that log source. So the more complex rules, to answer the question quickly, the more complex rules are around 6 weeks. The easier rules are around 2 weeks. And by rules, I mean use cases.
Excellent. So generally, what we would try and do, we wouldn't then typically, to put it to be blunt, create a quick and dirty rule to address some problem and then stick it in and then tune it as we go.
No,
so that's not the approach, right?
No, we wouldn't do that. That's bad for both parties. One, it gives our guys could start to suffer from ticket fatigue from high false positives and then miss something that actually matters. And the client, if we're constantly escalating tickets that need tuned and clearly aren't true positives, but the rule's just not built in a way that can identify that, then the client's going to be getting called out of their bed or interrupted during their daily tasks to go and deal with these incidents. So we make sure for 2 weeks that it's in a good position before it actually goes live.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. And just actually though, thinking about what you just said, what happens then during warranty if if a rule that's in warranty or still in development, if it actually uncovers something, what happens then?
Yeah, so that has happened on occasion when we're monitoring the rules. We see something that jumps out and we think, oh, that is not good. And what we'll generally do is we'll call the client anyway. We won't raise a ticket and go through the normal process because that's not in place yet. But what we'll do is we'll mention it to the client and say, we've just witnessed some rather unusual activity here. I think you probably would better going and investigate cred stuffing rules, or one of them, some sort of DLP rules as well. Sometimes we've picked up indicators that it's clearly someone's trying to steal something or sneak something out of the network. In which case, we'd contact the client and inform them of that, and with the caveat, of course, that it's a rule that's in test and it may still be a false positive. But when we were pretty confident it's something that's no good, we wouldn't just ignore it until the 2 weeks is done. We would raise that to the client.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. On the screen then, if you want any more information, everyone, I'm going to invite you again in a moment to ask any further questions. But if you want any more information, please have a look at our website. There's a load of data sheets and information on there. Or you could complete the contact form on the website or email with the address on the screen. By the way, we will be asking for feedback. We're always trying to, we've now done a few of these digital events, but we're always trying to improve them. So if you have any feedback, I think our marketing team are going to be sending out a very short survey after this. And we really would appreciate any feedback that can help us improve future events. So with that, I'll ask one more time if there's ask any questions, and if not, I will give you back seven minutes of your 7 minutes of your day. So I'll take that as a no, and just let me finish by thanking all of you who attended for taking the time out of your day. I hope it was useful for you, and again, please give us any feedback. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.